Hi, Neil.
Hi. Everybody, aloha. I feel almost naked up here. I don't have 7 bills in front of me. But I'm very happy to be signing these two, especially in this particular venue of putting bills together, law enforcement. Some people know that my relationship to the judicial system and to law enforcement goes back to days when I was a probation officer and starting every working day at a booking desk. Most particularly with the idea of firearms, there's a tendency, at least I think, it's maybe more than a tendency. It's kind of a regulated process from a media point of view to go to everybody but law enforcement when it comes to getting opinions or expressing views with regards to firearms. And I'm particularly grateful, and I'm sure law enforcement officers and people associated with law enforcement in the room are grateful to the judiciary chairs in the House and Senate for cutting through some of the more obvious propagandistic elements that might be out there. What I consider false confrontations that take place, which fail to address the fundamental questions with regard to law enforcement and firearms. The first bill, 69, that Senator Baker, Galataria, Green, and Sparrow, among others, were espousing, is a good example of what I'm talking about. I guess the garden variety way of expressing it is closing a loophole. But it's more than that. A loophole is almost like some inadvertent mistake or something, a kind of marginal issue. It isn't. It deals with the acquisition of firearms outside the state of Hawaii and the avoidance of background checks. You have only to see what can happen when we have a failure in that regard, whether it's previous criminal activity or mental illness, and understand how important a background check is. It should be obvious to everybody. Why there should even be an argument about it, why it can't just be done administratively almost, is almost beyond reason. I recall, as a probation officer, the first thing I did, the very first thing that was simply required in the everyday activity of doing a report for the court was to do the background check on ID with fingerprints. It's one of the reasons I'm a big supporter of DNA, taking DNA with arrests, because that's when you find out whether or not somebody's was wanted somewhere else, has a previous record, there may be a warrant out, those kinds of things, more than or as an additional tool, a crime-fighting tool that fingerprints provide. That's a background check. That's the first thing you do. You can't come before the court and the court says, if you check the background of the person in front of you, you're doing a report. Now here you're talking about the acquisition of firearms, and there's no background check? Come on. It doesn't make any sense. And you bring that firearm into the state and you possess it and you bypass the background check process. So again, I'm appreciative of the chairs and their committees zeroing in on the essential feature of this bill. And then the second bill, SB2, the Simulated Firearms. Senator He, I think, was the key sponsor here. And again, the House Judiciary Committee acted in a collaborative way on this. It amends the offenses of terroristic threatening in the first degree and robbery in the first degree to include the use of simulated firearms. Well, maybe while this bill was being conceived, I got information. Talk about simulated firearms. You can actually design a firearm now as if you were doing a copy, running a copy machine, and you can get a three-dimensional facsimile, I guess, of a firearm that can shoot a bullet. They can actually fire a bullet. I mean, that's the degree of technological advancement, quote unquote, that we have. So these simulated firearms is no joke. This isn't a kid running around coming out of the little plastic pool with a G.I. Joe pretend gun and simulating protecting his mom or dad or something like that. This is serious business. These bills assist law enforcement in their duty to serve the public. I believe that 69 requires the county police department to perform fingerprint, photograph, and background checks on those who register a firearm procured out of state. And it's a sensible one. If the person is already registered, the police can waive the requirement if they choose. That's a judgment call by the law enforcement. We rely on professionals that make judgment calls every single day, all day long. And so this recognizes the realities there. And the plain fact is, and it's sad to say, that simulated firearms are increasingly utilized in robberies and especially in robberies and other crimes where the simulation of the firearm is meant to threaten, is meant to terrorize, is meant to subdue the other person's natural reaction to what they might otherwise be engaged in if they hadn't seen somebody with a gun or with a simulated gun and verbal threats. It's a serious matters. The people who believe, the people who are the victims of those crimes, they don't know the difference. They are the ones that are threatened. They're the ones that are terrorized. They're the ones who are the victims. And these crimes are being the legislation with respect to these crimes is being amended accordingly. And so I'm very happy to have members of law enforcement and the legislature here today. So I'm going to ask the legislators, the two chairs, to come up for the signing, and then afterwards we'll take some pictures together for those who would like to have a memorial of this signing. Anything you'd care to say, Carl or Clayton, at this juncture before we sign?
Oh, I think they're both good bills, and I'm glad you're going to sign them. How's that?
Wow, that's short.
Good. All set?
As you were.
As I was. All right. Okay. First, SB2. Then I'm going backwards now. I stated the issues here. SB2. By the way, just before I do, I've signed so many of these. I just wanted to say, the reason I go into these explanations and so on is not that the folks necessarily here don't know the background or have been through all of this, but this is a public record. And I want everybody to know, I pay close attention to this. Every single one of these bills I've been through. There's no pro forma signing, and as they're nodding around the room. I mean, we spend hours and hours and hours showing, I think, the respect that the effort, the legislative effort and the community efforts that are made behind all these bills. So I'm happy to be doing this today, and I want you to know that we pay close attention.
Before you sign, I actually want to thank HPD. I can't remember your
Major
name.
Robinson.
Yeah, Major Robinson. Thank you very much for helping us. And of
I'd like to
course,
thank both of you. I mean, not
Yes.
just on behalf of the
because we
company.
worked this thing through.
Right.
I mean, we actually struggled with this thing.
It was a long process, and both of you were very, very helpful to me, both personally and professionally.
And
Thank you
Keith
very
County
much.
Sheriff as well.
Oh yes, the prosecutors have been helpful in this too. Very good.
Thank you.
Done. Now, this is SB69, which will become Act 254, relating to firearms. Done. Okay. Let's take pictures of the bills first, and then I'm going to ask the police and anyone else who wants to get their picture taken with the bills to do so. Sorry. These aren't cemented in. There we go. Carl, why don't you kind of hold that and plate if you can help me with this. Whoops. There we go. Kyle? How's that?
Okay, right there. 1, 2, and 3. Then one more. 1, 2, and 3. And then one right there. Alright. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Okay, how about law enforcement now? Yep. Yeah, take the pen. Thank you very much. Here we go.
Thank you, Governor.
We'll put a hand on that one.
Thanks for working
There we
so hard
go.
on that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Ready?
Okay, right there again. 1, 2, and 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. And then right here. Alright.